Hi, everyone. It's Jamie, Joe, and Foo. Foo is joining me today. My cat, he's sitting on the back of my chair if you are listening and not watching. And then I also have a special guest with me today, Heidi McCahon. How are you, Heidi?
Good. How are you, Jamie Joe?
I feel extra chipper this morning. I don't know why. And it seems kind of odd for Friday because we're recording on a Friday. And maybe I'm just compensating for the fact that I'm absolutely exhausted.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just kind of one of those things. Well, you're a listener of the podcast, so you know this, but for anybody else joining, the format of this podcast is not the typical interview an author with a series of long questions. It's more like we're sitting down with coffee and we'll talk books, but we don't know where the chat's going to take us. And so you can just kind of journey with us and eavesdrop. That's kind of the format of this podcast. So, but Heidi, tell me a little bit about you and your writing, because you've never been on the podcast before. So I'm really happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love to listen, so it's exciting to be a guest. My name's Heidi McCahon. I live in North Carolina. I have one husband and 3 sons, and
Thanks for the clarification of the
just
numbers.
want to make that clear. And I have a golden doodle who is also a boy, so I'm surrounded. I grew up in Alaska. Long story there, but my childhood has turned out to be pretty helpful because I use a lot of my experiences in Alaska to write books set in Alaska. So, yeah, I'm primarily a stay-at-home mom, but my boys are all teenagers now, so it's a new season. I have 1 in college and 2 in high school.
Wow.
And I write a lot of romance novels set in small towns.
That's a great introduction. I love it.
Thank you.
I think I said your name was Heidi McCahon, didn't I?
That's okay. Ironically, I grew up with a Heidi McCahon, and I used to get, like, if she won a track meet and her prize had to be mailed to her, I would get her prize in the mail. And one time she won a science fair contest, and so I got her prize. I was like, hey, Heidi, it's me, Heidi. I need to give you your prize back. So it's funny. No worries.
That's really funny. That's really funny. Yeah, I don't know why I said McCahon because I knew it was McCann, but whatever.
Maybe there is
like
a Heidi
staring at me on the screen here.
It's okay.
McCann.
There you go.
It's just kind of one of those things, like you have a long week and everything runs together. And for some reason, I save a lot of my writing to do on Fridays, which is a really bad idea.
Yeah, well.
Because I'm kind of done. Yep.
I know.
Yep. Okay, so you write small town romances, a lot of them set in Alaska, and you write for the Harlequin love-inspired line, correct?
Yes, that is true.
So how many books are you typically putting out a year?
Well, I would love to crank out 4 a year, but I'm not quite there yet. So far, I probably write 3 a year, but 2 get published. I basically have a book published every 6 months.
Every 6 months? That's awesome.
And I'm starting to write for the trade line. Yes. I've written 1, and my second one comes out next year, so that will change things because, spoiler alert, it takes a long time to write 100,000 words. I had no idea.
It does. They're a little bit different. So, yeah, tell us, for readers who aren't aware of it, Harlequin has come out with a trade line now. So there is a difference between the littler paperback copies that you'll see like at Walmart and through their club, and then there's the trade. So kind of help readers understand what that is.
So for us, that's a difference in word count. We still measure things in word count in publishing. Yeah. We just do. But
we do.
The standard love-inspired book and the love-inspired suspense book is 55,000 words. That's like 200 pages in paperback form. And then the trade length are the longer books designed to be competitive in the marketplace, to be perfectly honest. And so it's 100,000 words, which that's like 350 pages in a paperback. It's a larger book, and we are tackling what I would say are more complex themes. So for me personally, I can have 3 points of view. For me, so far, that's been like a mom and a daughter, or 2 sisters' points of view, and then the hero still gets a point of view because it's a romance. But my first one was women's fiction set in Alabama, and my second one is a rom-com set in Alaska. So I just went way to the other end of the spectrum to me. So we'll see how that goes. It was not my idea. They asked me to write a rom-com set in Alaska. I was like, all right, here we go.
Why not? Why not? I would think that would be a big thing, though, because Alaska always seems to be a place that's like, it's a destination place for readers.
Yes.
And then rom-coms are just always fun to have around. So
yes, and my editor explained to me that there are lots of different ways to define a rom-com. You know, she doesn't necessarily have to trip and spill her coffee and run into the hero. you can have sort of a slapstick kind of comedy, but also witty banter, and they can have great senses of humor. So a lot of romance is sort of in the rom-com family right now.
I like that. Yeah. So the love inspired are the 55,000 word, and then we have the trade, which is 100,000. Do you find you prefer one or the other, or are they both equally as fun to write?
They are fun to write. The trade length, I did start out self-published, but I wrote more in like the 75,000 word range. So having to add in enough complexity and enough interesting content to get to 100,000, that is hard for me. And so my editor had to help me. And then I missed some things. There's some plot holes that had to be filled in. So the real work happened for me in the rewriting, the revising stage. So I feel like I kind of let the horses run if you give me more words. And the longer I live, the more I find things that I want to write about. Like, I have a friend that's incarcerated. I didn't ever think that that would be a passion of mine, but all of a sudden I have a heart for incarcerated people. So I'm probably not going to write a lot of books with a felon in them or a convicted felon, but just sort of the themes around that, like redemption, second chances.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm starting to see not everything that I want to write about is going to fit in a 200-page book, but I also like to sell books. And so I rely on the team at Love Inspired to tell us, hey, here's what seems to be trending. Here's what readers like.
Yeah.
So
that's
it's
fun.
a balancing act.
That's cool. It's fun that you get to kind of dabble in both worlds too.
Yes.
And I just, like I was telling you before I hit record, I just finished my first love inspired suspense book that comes out in August.
Yay.
And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be so easy compared to writing the 100,000 word books that I'm doing for Bethany House that have all these different layers and twists and turns. And this is more of a straightforward suspense. It was so much harder. I could not believe how much harder it was to write a shorter book.
I think it is hard. And also, if you told me I had to write a short story today, I would probably cry. Like, I feel like the shorter it gets, the harder it is, because you don't have very much wiggle room.
No, you don't. I started out writing novellas. A novella was my first published work. And, 20,000 words, you're like at 15,000 and you feel like you just started the story. And you're like, oh, shoot, I have to wrap it up. It's crazy. It's weird.
Yep. And if it's a romance, how in the world are they going to fall in love? So then it's like they had to have known each other before and what happened. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Writing is hard, people.
It is hard. It is hard. So all of you readers, love on your authors. Love on your favorite authors. Leave them reviews, share their books, tell the world about them. It's great.
And if you read our book in a day, don't tell us. I'm just kidding.
No. Tell us it takes like 6 months to read our book. Not because they're boring, but because they're just so good. It takes that long to devour them.
Yeah, if you want to say I couldn't put it down, that's amazing. I want to hear that all the time. But if you're like, oh, I read it in a day. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that took me a lot longer to write. Thank you. No. Oh, that's funny. So tell me a little bit about Alaska. So you grew up in Alaska. Why? Were you born there?
That's a valid question. No. And what I'm going to tell you is all true. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents are all from a small town north of Philadelphia. My parents met and fell in love at a Bible study. My dad went to college. My mom went to nursing school. After that, he convinced her to marry him and move to Alaska to serve as missionaries.
Oh.
So, what an adventure. They went to Alaska, 1970 maybe, and they served for a small time in a small village, and it was hard. That's just a hard life. And missionary community is pretty vibrant in Alaska because before it became a state, every religious organization wanted representation there. So the idea of going to Alaska to convert somebody wasn't really a new idea, but it's just hard, and it's really cold, and it's really dark. And so I'll condense the story, but they left and went back to, we call it outside the lower 48. They went back to where their parents were and tried to have like normal jobs. They had my sister and myself, and then they went back to Alaska, and my grandparents helped them buy a business. Now, we call it a lodge in Alaska, but I just want to be very clear. It's kind of like a convenience store on the side of the road. And then my dad my dad built a campground. There were some cabins there that he fixed up.
Cool.
We generated our own power with generators and had well water, so it's kind of off the grid, but we had a lot of tourists because the highway went like right past our front door. So I grew up with like 12 buses a day with people pouring through, and we sold them t-shirts and they used the restroom and pie and cookies. But my kitchen table was like right there on the other side of the counter, so it was a little bit of a fishbowl existence. And my bedroom was just down the hall, and then I could go outside and play, and my grandparents were almost always around. And so really a fascinating way to grow up. And I knew that other people lived differently because first my sister went to school and we lived an hour from the school. And so I knew there were other people out there that had a different experience than mine. And we'd go to Colorado to see my cousins, but it's a wild way to grow up. So I stayed there all the way in through high school. And then I went to college in Spokane, Washington, which is, mid-sized American city.
Right.
And then I gradually moved across the nation. I went to Tennessee and then to North Carolina. And I was an athletic trainer at a large university. So a lot of ankle taping and handing out ice bags. And I have always wanted to be a writer, but just didn't quite know how to make it happen. So,
But you did.
I did eventually, yes.
That's good. Yeah. Yes. How many books have you written then?
I have some that I've written that will never see the light of day. But
don't we all?
Yes. I have a few on my hard drive that will not come out. I believe my 16th novel was just released, if you count my indie publications and then what I've done with Harlequin.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's good. Well, congrats. And the whole Alaska thing, like, I really want to go to Alaska. I've not been to Alaska, and I really want to go. I really do. It's not easy to get to.
It's not, and it's also huge. Like I grew up in one little part, and I've been kind of in a radius around there, but there are parts I've never seen. Like the parts that you see when you take a cruise, I've never seen there. There's no roads to those parts.
Interesting. Yeah, I suppose that
the
makes
part
sense.
that sort of curves down toward Canada. I want to see all of that. So I want to take a cruise to Alaska because
all right,
there's a lot
let's
to see.
Do it. Let's book it.
Let's do it.
Heidi and Jamie go on a cruise. We'll do a new podcast.
Okay,
and we'll
sounds
just
good.
podcast every day from the ship. I think that would work.
Maybe someone would sponsor it. That'd be great.
I was just gonna say, let's do a Kickstarter campaign. That would be fun. That would be fun. I want to go to Alaska. I want to go on a dog sled. I know that's probably stereotypical of Alaska, but I do want to go on a dog sled.
So a lot of people tell me that when they go to Alaska, their favorite thing is to go and see the people who professionally mush and to hold the husky puppies. And I was just like, really? I never would have thought of that. Okay, great.
Yeah. It's just not something you get in the lower 48.
No, it's not.
I mean, and I live in Wisconsin, so we have a lot of snow here.
Yeah.
And I might be ignorant, but I don't hear about dog sledding in this area.
People from Minnesota tend to have dog teams because they'll come to Alaska and compete in the races. But I've never heard of anyone from Wisconsin who does.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I have a friend actually who's also a love-inspired suspense author, Sarah Varland. And she lives in Alaska, and that's what she does for fun. And so she keeps saying, you need to come and go on a dog sled. And I'm like, I know.
Field trip to Sarah's house.
I'm thinking, and if I now that I'm writing love inspired suspense, I'm thinking maybe I could write off the trip as research.
For sure.
And set a book in Alaska and make everybody who grew up in Alaska mad at me because I totally, wreck the Alaskan landscape and everything.
By the way, we do get mad about that. Speaking as an Alaskan, I've lost my stuffing on more than one occasion.
I'm sure you have.
A piece of artwork that poorly portrays my state.
It's one of the things I remember when I was getting into writing, I would talk to several writers and they're like, the whole concept where it's like, write what you know. They're like, write a place that you know. Like if you're not from Georgia and you're from North, like I am in Wisconsin, don't write about Georgia. It's its own culture. It's its own slang. We don't call soda in Georgia pop like you do in Wisconsin. And so I've learned to just pick places that I know well enough that I feel I'm not going to irritate somebody too much.
There you go. I think for Alaska books, I think the broader audience wants a certain reading experience. So I think people that aren't from there or haven't been there can write about it successfully, and there's plenty of people that do. Lots of love-inspired authors put books set in Alaska, and I don't think they've ever been, or maybe have only been one time, but I think Alaska, people want they want what they think about Alaska. They sort of want that perpetuated, and I'm always like, but that's not how it happens. It's hard. It's one of the harder things they've had to deal with.
That is interesting. That is because I'm sure there's probably a lot of perceptions of Alaskan life that is completely erroneous.
Yes.
What would you say are like some of the biggest misconceptions?
So the question that I get asked here, I've lived in North Carolina, gosh, almost 20 years. So the first question I'm always asked is it dark there all the time? Well, no. No, it's not because well, the way that the universe works, that's not possible. But it is dark a lot in the wintertime. Yes, I went to school in the dark and came home in the dark. But then in the summer, it's light all the time. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't think you can understand it unless you've lived it,
Right. It is weird. It is weird because I'm kind of like the concept of having a continual darkness seems a little bit depressive, but then the concept of being always light also seems depressive to me because I'm like, I want to go to sleep and I want it to be dark.
Right. So if you live there, I think your body's circadian rhythm just adjusts. Okay. But if you don't live there, it's hard to get used to because I would go to college in Washington State, which is different than Alaska, and then come home and it's already light all the time. And I'm like, whoa. So it is something you have to adjust to. But, we don't have igloos. We don't. Igloos aren't legit.
On.
We don't ice fish from our front yard.
Really?
Like, no.
Shucks. You're just ruining Alaska for. No, I'm just kidding.
But I'm sure there's things.
You don't have bears for pets?
There are a lot of bears, but never as a pet.
Now, I think one misconception that I've heard is that you have polar bears in Alaska.
There are polar bears way up in the Arctic.
Right.
Way past the Arctic Circle, but they can't.
They're not really in like Alaska, like civilized Alaska, I guess. That sounds horrible.
I can think of one time where I was sent to go play either a basketball or a volleyball game in a village in the Arctic, and they said, we would love to give you a tour of the village, but it's 55 below zero, and there is a polar bear roaming through town, and he is hungry. So we cannot, your parents, your principal, all of the people back at your hometown would not be happy with us if we exposed you to that danger. And so who wants to go outside in 55 below anyway? Like, I'm playing an indoor sport here, but I did want to see the bear. I did want to see the bear, but they wouldn't let us.
And there's a part of me that's like, if you're going to die, do it interestingly. Right. So, I mean, hypothermia in negative 55 is one thing. And then to be eaten by a polar bear, I mean, that's just epic. Right.
And I was like 16 and I was thinking, well, I can think of some people here that I wouldn't mind if he ate. Like I just won't be the closest one to the bear. Come on. There's like 50 of us here. Come on.
I can run faster than these other people, so I'm not going to be the one that gets eaten.
Right.
Oh, man. Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't think as a general rule, like ideally, I think polar bears stay on the ice near the Arctic Ocean because that's where their food is. But
Right. So can you see Russia?
I also get that question. Thanks so much, Sarah Palin. That's a quote that will never die.
No, it won't.
I could not see Russia, but I was in South Central Alaska, so very tricky.
Well,
but
there you go. My son actually asked me the other day. He goes, "If we go to Alaska someday, can I just look across and see Russia?" I'm like, "Dude, it's not that close. Like, I mean, it's close, but it's not that close. It's not a lake."
No. To be honest, I haven't been to that western part of Alaska, Nome, and so I don't know what you see when you're there. I mean, maybe.
I don't think you can actually like see Russia. Maybe there's little strips of land or something, but I don't think it's. I mean, you're not looking over onto the Kremlin. Let's just put it that way.
No, you're not gonna. Nope.
No, you're not saying
Vladdy's not going to be waving.
No. Okay, so back to your books because we have way squirreled.
That's fine.
But that's what we're good at here at Madlit Musings. Right. That's why it's called Madlit, because it doesn't make sense. It's just madness.
We are right on track as
we
far
are
as I'm concerned.
totally on track with the mission of this podcast. But are all of your love-inspired novels set in Alaska? Is that kind of like a theme, or do you kind of pop around to different places?
Right now they're set in Alaska because that has sold fairly well for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think because I did grow up there, I think, it's a little easier for me to write those books. I entered a contest. And because I lived in North Carolina, the idea for that book was set here in North Carolina. So my first one was North Carolina, and then I did 3 set in Colorado.
Okay.
And then I said, do you want to see more in Colorado, or could I do something in Alaska? And she said, oh, let's try Alaska. And so here I am.
Okay. All right. So people can really get the true Alaskan romance because you're going to be extremely authentic because you have credibility.
Yes. I mean, it's all fiction, but yes, I feel like it's pretty authentic to what life in Alaska is like in the small towns.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so then the one that's coming out next February is the longer trade, and that's set in Alaska as well, but it's a rom-com, correct?
Yes, and they asked me to pick a new setting with a whole new cast of characters.
Oh, okay.
So
you really got to
I said
scratch.
Okay.
Do you make up the locations? Like, do you have a fictionalized town, or do you actually use real towns?
It is a real place, but I just changed the name and don't ever tell anybody what.
You did not hear it here.
I mean,
at Madlet Music.
Yeah, I grew up in Valdez, and so a lot of what I wrote was based on my experience there. But now I'm writing an inland setting, and so I kind of do like towns around Fairbanks, around Denali.
Okay.
So
oh yeah.
I just make up my own name.
Fictionalize it. Sometimes it's easier to do. I do that too. Like I'll use a small town that I'm familiar with as the base.
Yes.
But I usually slap on a fictional name just so I don't make anybody upset if I do incidentally make an error.
Right. And I found that if you try to use the real place, someone will tell you there's no stop sign there.
Right.
There's not a bank on that corner. And
right.
I have not been back to Alaska in 20 years. And so I have to go look at photos that people have posted on Facebook who are there, or I have to, find some kind of research on the internet. So it's easier just to make up a fake town.
I think that's smart. All right. So if readers want to follow you, get to know you, see your books and all of that, how do they do that?
I'm most active on Instagram, HeidiMcCahon.author, and then you can always look at my website, HeidiMcCahon.com. I keep that fairly well updated. And then I do use Facebook quite a bit as well, because that seems to be where the readers hang out.
Yeah, a lot of them are there, no doubt. Well, this has been a blast.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to your trade coming out next year. I think that's going to be fun.
Thank you.
To see that.
Thank you.
And there are a lot more trades coming out from Harlequin in the clean, faith-friendly fiction. So anybody who wants to check out those, I know there's suspense, there's some women's fiction, etc. So it's a cool opportunity.
Yes, and there's a really sweet Christmas one coming out by Catherine Springer. Should be out. Well, after this airs, it won't be too long.
Yeah.
Christmas at Spruce Hill Farm, I think. Anyway, I got to read an early copy. It's super sweet.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. That's good. And you need those feel-good ones when Christmas is coming. I always like those. It's just nice to have something fun to read. So. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for being with us today. This was a blast talking about Alaska and romance and books. Let's do it again.
Thank you, Jamie Jo. Yes, it was so fun. Thanks so much.